We will start in 1 minute.
Morning, Rabbi.
Morning. So we're going to start in 1 minute.
We're up to Mishnah 18.
Yeah, the last Mishnah.
Yeah.
Stacey, I think the first books are coming up this week.
Amazing.
Yeah. In fact, I'll give everybody in the shir a book. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Okay, let's start. Good morning, guys. Okay, so where are we up to? We're up to the last Mishnah of the first chapter, and we're learning this in memory of Mark. When is his Yotzat, Stacey?
It will be it's April, the 20th of April.
Okay, look it up. Okay, so now we've actually gone through the first chapter. What I'm going to do, let me just quickly read the last Mishnah to you. It's Mishnah 18, and then we're going to go back to the first and second Mishnah, and we're going to come back to it. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel Omer. Now, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was the father of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who actually authored the Mishnah. So let's say as follows. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Omer, Al Shloshat Varim Ha'olam Omer. The world stands on three things. Now you should recognize those words. Al Shloshat Varim Ha'olam Omer. The world stands on three things. What are they? Ala Din, that there should be justice and fair justice. Vala Emes, there should be truthfulness, and Shalom and peace. Shnei Maras, it says, with truth and justice and peace, you should judge in your gates. Okay, whatever that means. Now let's just go, before we learn it, let us go back to the second Mishnah. Please open up to the second Mishnah if you can. And we said like this, we're finishing the first chapter today, so let's just give a synopsis of what we've learned. The very first Mishnah told us that the very first Mishnah said as follows, that Moses received the Torah from Sinai and passed it on to Joshua to the elders to the prophets passed it on to the men of the Great Assembly, and they, the men of the Great Assembly, said three things. Now we explained as follows. Why did the Mishnah tell us that? We said actually that was a 5-step program on how to transform your life. It wasn't telling it to you for historical purposes, because this book, Avos, which we've learned, Pirkei Avos, is volume 37 of the oral tradition. So if the oral tradition wanted to tell you how Moses received the Torah and passed it on, it would have actually put it in the first book. In fact, it didn't even have to mention it all because we know it anyways. So we said that this Pirkei Avos is there to teach you how to become a mensch, which is so important because at any age you can transform your life. It doesn't really matter what happened yesterday. There are consequences to what happened yesterday and the day before, but really what's important is how we live our lives from today. And that Mishnah was telling us a 5-step program on how to transform our life. The first thing is, why did Moses receive the Torah from Sinai? Or why did God give the Torah at Sinai? God gave the Torah at Sinai because it was the humblest of all the mountains. It wasn't the biggest mountain in the Sinai Peninsula, it was the smallest. And that tells you humility. And that's what it says, that Moses received the Torah from Sinai. The nuance is Moses received the Torah because of his humility. The first step to changing your life is you need humility. Humility means where you don't take yourself too serious. Humility means that when things happen to you from above, you accept them. Humility means when somebody insults you, you not that you're weak, you overlook it. You're very forgiving. You get the wrong seat at a wedding, you get table 52, you don't walk out with a faribble, just accept it. And so many, we could actually have shiur after shiur just discussing what humility is. The first thing you need is humility. The Gemara says, why do you get 2 ears and 1 mouth? To listen far more than you talk. That's humility. A person who's not humble always has to dominate the room, always has to speak a lot. And that's the first thing to change your life. And it's quite easy to do, by the way. You can practice it and eventually become it. So humility is the first step. After humility, you need to have, Moses gives it to Joshua. Joshua is diligence, perseverance. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Have a dream, whether that dream is achieving something or fixing up a character flaw. Don't give up at the first obstacle. The third thing you need is always to be like an elder. What was an elder? Joshua gave it to the elders. Elders are wise people. They weren't old, they were wise. And a wise person sees the bigger picture. In other words, if he's having a banquet at home and somebody comes One of his kids come and he's got all sorts of celebrities coming to the dinner, and one of the kids comes and spills all over the table. He's wise. So just leave it. You're going to start fighting and shouting, it's not going to be good. Just leave it. That's a wise person. The prophet, the elders gave it to the prophets. The prophets were able to see the future. They're able to see what's going to happen. They were able to see, they looked at what was going to be if the father did go mad because the kid did spill on the table. What would the guests ever come back? So they're looking at the future. And then the men of the Great Assembly were those people who made a difference. And the timeline is after Nebuchadnezzar destroyed the temple. Israel was messed. They came to Israel after Babylon fell to Persia and King Cyrus was king. They came back and they made a difference. They rebuilt the temple. We said that's the fifth step. The fifth step you need in transforming your life is always make a difference. If you have all the knowledge in the world and you don't share it, you're not worth anything. If you have all the money in the world and you're selfish, you're not great. Great is when you make a difference in this world. And everybody here at this year has something to offer someone else, and therefore make sure to share it. That's what we learned from that. Then they said the three things. A teacher has to be patient, or a judge has to be patient. Raise up everybody. Everybody you meet, you have to raise up and put fences around yourself. That's how we explained the first Mishnah. Now let's go to the second Mishnah. The second Mishnah, which is very similar to the Mishnah we're learning now, let's just read the words. It was Shimon HaTzadik, and he was the last of the men of the Great Assembly. Now he lived about 307 years before Common Era. Okay? So he lived about 2,300 something years ago. So Shimon HaTzadik, he was the last of the men of the Great Assembly, and he said like this: the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, service, and acts of goodness and kindness. Let me just go through the Mishnah again. So Shimon HaTzadik, so first of all, he lived at exactly the same time as Alexander the Great. What actually happened was, just to give you the history, Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, he destroyed the temple. He eventually fell. His kingdom fell to Persia, Cyrus. Cyrus allowed the Jews to go back and build the temple, then he stopped it. He died afterwards, and Achashverosh in the Purim story took over. After the Purim story, Achashverosh and Queen Esther had a son by the name of Darius, and he allowed the Jewish people to go back to Israel and rebuild the temple. Now, that was the men of the Great Assembly. The last of the men of the Great Assembly was none other than Shimon HaTzadik. Now, Shimon HaTzadik was absolutely unique. He was absolutely unique because when he was living, there were a whole bunch of miracles that just occurred in his lifetime. The definition of a tzaddik, by the way, is not a learned person, not a good person. The true definition of a tzaddik is somebody who has no evil within him whatsoever. Not that he controls himself, he's absolutely godly. So he lives with heaven on earth. That's why it says that a tzaddik decrees and God makes happen. They're totally godly beings. Anyways, so Shimon HaTzadik, and this whole bunch of miracles took place while he was alive in the temple. And Shimon HaTzadik said, in fact, there are three things that the world exists on. One of them is Torah. What does that mean, Torah? Just before I go into it, just let me tell you, which I don't know if we did or didn't, his connection with Alexander the Great. So eventually Persia falls to Alexander the Great, king of Macedonia. He takes over after his father Philip, and he conquers the world. And he's coming to Israel, and there were a certain group of people living in Israel called the Samaritans, and they told him to destroy the holy temple that was just rebuilt. Alexander was on his way to destroying it. Shimon HaTzadik, the Gemara says, put on his priestly garments and went to meet him. As soon as Alexander and his entourage met Shimon HaTzadik, he jumped off his horse and he bowed to Alexander the Great. And his general said, why are you bowing? He said, I'm telling you, every time I go out to war, on my miraculous battles, I see an image, I see a vision of a holy man in front of me. This is the man. And he was very good to the Jews. He didn't destroy the temple. Eventually he wanted to put a statue of himself in the temple. Alexander the Great said, no, don't do that. Let's rather name all Kohanim born that year. In honor of you, let us name them Alexander. And that's how today you have a lot of Jewish people called Alexander. Okay. Now, Shimon HaTzadik, and he was very good to the Jews. Shimon HaTzadik said the world stands on three things: Torah, Avodah, service, and acts of goodness and kindness. So let me be a bit technical today. I'm not sure if we were before, if I told it to you. When God created the world, if Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned on that first day of creation, what would have happened? Godliness would have descended to this world. Heaven would have descended on this world, and we would have lived forever. There would be no pandemics, no sickness, no pain, no death. It would have been a world where all we would have done is study the spiritual worlds. And you can't imagine how real and how great. Even a person who died 3,000 years ago is still exploring the spiritual world. That's how exciting it is. And when Mashiach comes, just like today, we haven't really explored the universe. We don't even know if there's life on other planets. There's a whole bunch of things we're not even aware of. Even in the sea, we're not even aware of things. So can you imagine when the spiritual worlds open up to us, how much there is? Good. That would have happened if Adam and Eve wouldn't have sinned. For good reason, Adam and Eve sinned. Not that they were rebellious. I mean, they were created by God. There was good reason why they sinned. They wanted to be kicked out of the Garden of Eden. But because they ate from the fruit of the tree of knowledge, a whole new program began. Heaven remained heaven and earth remained earth. There was no marriage between the two. And in last week's parasha, the parasha we read yesterday on Shabbos, we read the story of how God gave the 10 commandments and the Torah to the Jewish people. That was the beginning of heaven marrying earth, when spirituality will be injected into the earth. And then, from then until Mashiach comes, every single time a Jew does a mitzvah with something physical, you're actually elevating the physical and you're making the physical heavenly. And then eventually, when enough of that is happening, we'll open our eyes and we'll actually see that all physical is spiritual and heaven will be revealed on earth. That's the way Jews look at it. When Mashiach comes, heaven will be revealed on earth. No more wars, no more suffering, no more sickness, etc., etc. And the second part of Mashiach coming is all those people who are resting will stand up and all families will be reunited. That's fundamental Jewish feeling. Good. So Shimon HaTzadik said that one of the pillars that the world stands on is Torah. God created the world for Torah to be learnt. When a group of ladies on a Monday morning, when you could be doing anything else, and we sit and learn Torah, what we are really doing is we're bringing godliness, we're bringing infinite energy, and like we download an app into the phone and all of a sudden it's in the phone, we are downloading heaven into this world. We're downloading godly energy, and that's why God created the world. That's what it says, Yom HaShishi, on the sixth day, not Yom Shishi, Yom HaShishi. If the Jews wouldn't have accepted the Torah, God would have destroyed the world and made it into nothing. God wants heaven to come down to earth. So one of the pillars that the world stands on is Torah. Torah being learned. Godliness being brought into this world. And how do you do it? By us learning Torah now. This infinite wisdom, which we're taking out of a book. What we're actually doing is the concept is coming into our minds. Our minds are enveloping it. It's becoming enveloped in our minds. It's becoming one with us. What's becoming one with us? The Torah. We are bringing godliness into this world. That is Torah. So that is bringing heaven down to earth. Then Shimon HaTzadik said, the second pillar that holds up the world is earth becoming heaven. How does earth becoming heaven? How does this animalistic earth become godly? Well, when they offered a sacrifice on the altar, the whole animal world, the whole physical world, and they sprinkled salt on it, which is inanimate, the whole physical world was being elevated. So sacrifice elevated the world. So Torah brings heaven down to earth. Sacrifices lift the world. Today, when we offer ourselves as a sacrifice, when we find the animal within us, whether we be the goring ox or the docile lamb or the arrogant goat, and we work on ourselves, we're offering ourselves as sacrifices to God. We elevate the world. When we learn the laws of sacrifices, it's as if we offered them. So every single day we are elevating the world. So the first thing you need is to bring heaven down to earth. That's done through learning Torah. The second thing is through prayer and offering yourself as a sacrifice. You're lifting the physical world. And then when you walk around and you be kind, you visit the sick, you hospitable, acts of goodness and kindness, not charity, because you can be charitable without being kind. You can throw a coin at somebody and make him feel like a dog, right? So acts of goodness and kindness is manifesting God in this world. And that's what he said, the three pillars that the world stands on. That's what Shimon HaTzadik said. Okay, now let's jump to the Mishnah we're learning today. So Shimon HaTzadik was speaking about the three pillars of why God created the world. For Torah, for heaven to come down to this earth, for earth to be uplifted, and God being manifested through acts of goodness and kindness. Now we're going to go to Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the source of the Mishnah today, because he says a similar statement. He says the world exists because of three things. And what are the three things? Al-Hadin, justice. Now what does justice mean? Justice means that there has to be a just system. We can all be critical of the government, right? We can all be critical of the government. But if there's no justice, if somebody guilty has got away with his crime and somebody's innocent has been put away, the whole society will fall apart. You have to have a justice system. And I must tell you something, when we all speak about Zuma abusing power and etc., etc., the truth of the matter, if somebody bribes a traffic cop, you're also abusing power. There's no difference. That's the power that we've been given. So justice, we all have the opportunity to do justice. And justice is being fair. I'll tell you a story. In America, in the time of the Depression, if I'm not mistaken, LaGuardia, there's a famous airport in America called LaGuardia Airport. It's in New York. LaGuardia was, I think, mayor of New York, but he was also he was a judge of the small claim court. It was a time of the Depression. Things were very, very bad, and people were starving. There was a lady. She was widowed, and she had her mother staying with her, and she had young children. Anyway, she was starving, and she one day ran into a supermarket, and she stole some bread. The cafe owner, the supermarket owner, wanted to set an example, and he had her locked up. Anyways, it comes to trial. LaGuardia is the judge. He listens to this. It was a few dollars. He listens to it, and he says, you know what? This lady is absolutely guilty, and she has to pay a fine of $20. Why? Because you have to set an example. And he fined her $20 because she stole the bread to feed her family. He then turned to everybody in the court, the jury and all the people who were watching the case, and he fined them each $1 to make up the $20, because he said, how can a city be so cruel where a woman has to steal bread? Now that's justice. That's justice with kindness, because honesty without compassion is nothing more than hostility. And justice means you take things into account. Yes, she had to be fined. She did wrong. But what was she supposed to do? And that's what you need. You need justice in this world, and fairness. And somebody who's been mistreated by a court will never ever trust the justice system again. That's why you had people coming out of Soviet Russia. You had people coming out of Soviet Russia just not trusting the system at all. They could never trust cops because cops were evil. So you need justice. And the third thing you need is emes, truth. Now, what does truth mean? We just take it we take it lightly, but what does truth mean? When people start lying to each other, all trust goes out. When people are lying to each other in a business, if everybody's lying to each other, the business won't last. In a relationship, if you keep lying to the people closest to you, your relationship will never, ever last. You need truthfulness. Now, the mission is not giving you suggestions here. The mission is telling you how to make your little world work and how to make the larger world. If you want the world to come right, start with yourself. And therefore, from now on, we can all put into practice, if we're not doing it 100%, just be just and make sure there's justice around you. And when it comes to truth, resolve. I'm not telling a lie anymore. I'm not even telling a white lie. By the way, in Jewish law, are you ever allowed to tell a white lie? Yes, if your husband comes home and he's not really asking you because he cares for your opinion. He's asking you because he just bought this tie and it's a polka dot green tie and he loves it. He thinks it's the best thing. And he asks you, if it'll make him happy, you can say yes, it'll make you happy. Because once again, truth without compassion is hostility. He likes it, so say it's fine. You're also allowed to bend the truth a little bit to make peace one to the other. And that's the third thing, shalom. Shalom means peace. So if you have these three things, that's when a society will continue. You can have all the philosophies. You can have, I'm going to teach the world Torah. I'm going to teach the world prayer, and I'm going to pray. But if there's no justice in this world, if there's no truthfulness in this world, and if there's no peace, if people aren't getting on, if people are backstabbing each other, the whole world can't exist. Now, let's just all practice this with our families. There's some people who love belligerency. They're only happy when there's a fight. Comes along the mission and says, no. Just overlook it. It doesn't have to be a fight. You can see it, by the way. Some of us get into a rut. Wherever we go, we're fighting. We get up in the morning, we're fighting with our spouses. Then we go, we're fighting with the maid. Then we go, we're fighting with the petrol attendant. We're fighting. We're fighting with the person who gives us a seat in the restaurant. We're always fighting. And the Mishnah says as follows, it cannot be. It cannot be. What eventually brought down the second temple? Internal fighting, by the way. God will overlook a lot of Jewish law when people aren't keeping it. But baseless hatred, God can't tolerate. And in fact, the entire temple was brought down because of baseless hatred, because people were fighting. And that's what the sentence is. That's why he brings the sentence. Look at the sentence he brings. Emes, truth, umishpat, justice, shalom and peace, shiftu, you should judge in your gates. And if you're not doing it in your gates, the gates are the gates of Yerushalayim. If you're not doing it in your gates, the whole city is going to fall apart. Your whole life is going to fall apart. In the few minutes we have, let me share with you what actually brought down the destruction of the temple. there was a banquet. And in the olden days, how it worked, you didn't send an invitation by mail, you actually sent it with a courier. Now, there was a man, he had a friend called Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. Some of you probably know the first part of the story. He had a friend by the name of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. And Bar Kamsa was his enemy, Kamsa was his friend. He sent an invitation, let's say it was his kid's wedding, whatever, he sent the invitation with his courier to Kamsa, his friend. By mistake, the courier got it wrong and he took it to Bar Kamsa. Bar Kamsa got the invitation and he said, wow, this guy had a faribble with me 15 years ago. You know what? He's making up with me. I'm going to the function. How nice, he's actually forgiven me. And he goes to the function, he's sitting there, and there are hundreds and hundreds of people there. And you know, everybody, when you walk into a function, you think the whole world's watching you. Nobody's watching you. Everybody's into their own things. Anyways, he's sitting there, and the host notices him, and he walks over to him and says, hey, what are you doing here? He said, hold on a second. I got the invitation to come to your function. He said, no, I didn't invite you. I meant to invite Kamsa. So I was very embarrassed, and he thought everybody was watching this. Nobody was watching. He thought everybody was watching. There were great sages there, and everybody's into their own things. Thought everybody was watching. He said, do me a favor, let's just settle this quietly. I'll pay for my meal, but don't publicly humiliate me. No, get out. Just quiet, get out. Eventually he said, I'll pay, he negotiates, I'll pay 2 meals, I'll pay half the function, I'll pay for the full function, just let me sit here. He said, no, out of here. Makes him stand up and kicks him out. He walks out feeling totally publicly humiliated, thinking everybody saw the thing. He was so angry, he was so burning, he never got over it. He just couldn't get over this. He couldn't get over it. When he was hurting everybody, he had to hurt with him. He eventually goes to the Roman governor and he says, the Jews are going to rebel against you. Send a sacrifice. You'll see they won't sacrifice it on the altar. They won't offer it on the altar. And which the governor does. He blemishes the animal that it couldn't be offered on the altar. As a result of that, they didn't offer the sacrifice. The Romans thought there was a revolution coming and they destroyed the temple. That was the final straw that caused the destruction of the temple. Good. Now, a lot of people know that story because it's traditional to learn on Tisha B'Av. So I once saw a character, to understand the characters. Let's go like this. Let's speak about the host for a minute. What was the host's psychological reason? What was he? Who was he? The host was an individual where you fight with him once and he doesn't make a noise, he just cuts you out of his life. You've hurt him once, bang, you're out of his life. He will never, ever make up with you again. You can send him flowers, you can send him ties, you can send him shirts, you can send him whatever you want. He will never make up with you. That is the host. And there are people like that if you hurt them once, which is not right in Jewish law, that if somebody apologizes, you eventually accept it. If you see the apology is sincere, you accept it. We're always asking God to forgive us. So if somebody hurts us, let's forgive. So the host is the unforgiving person. Good. Who is Bar Kamsa? He's the individual that when he gets hurt quickly. What does he get hurt quickly? But when he gets hurt, everybody has to be hurting with him. He's the guy that when he has a bad day at work, he comes up and he kicks the cat, he's screaming, he's shouting, because he has had a bad day. Everybody has to suffer with him. That's Bar Kamsa. So the host is far more quiet. You don't see his anger, but if you hurt him once, he cuts you out of his life. You know that there are families who never ever speak because of a faribble that happened at a wedding. So serious, a first cousin, an uncle, and aunt, by mistake got the wrong seat at the wedding and just never ever forgive. Ever. Okay? That's the host. Bar Kamsa is the person who's hurting. Everybody has to hurt with them. And who's Kamsa? Why is the story not called the host and Bar Kamsa? Why is it called Kamsa Bar Kamsa? What did Kamsa have to do with it? He wasn't even invited to the wedding, and he should have. And commentary explains the reason is because Kamsa, when he got the invitation, when he didn't get the invitation, he knew it was his good friend. And if it was a good friend that he was invited to the function, he probably knew that his friend is sensitive. He should have just popped in or said, I didn't get an invitation, whatever. He should have popped in. Okay, now that story, and that's why he's a little bit to blame. Now that story is very close to home. Let me tell you a story. When my oldest son, Aaron, was having his bar mitzvah, you make a list of who you're inviting. And obviously you can't invite everybody, but you're quite careful. Now there were 2 elderly men, not so old, but they were elderly at the time. They both passed on now. I made a conscious decision not to invite them. Now the reason is because by me inviting them, they would have massaged my own ego. And I was childish at the time. I thought that, you know what, they might think that I'm inviting them for a present. That's the truth of the matter. That's both. I had the same reason why I didn't invite them and others. Those I didn't invite because I was sure they might have thought I'm just inviting them for a present. Anyways, comes the bar mitzvah day, and guess what? At the shul service, they both come. They don't know each other, but both come in independently. And both said to me the same thing. They said, we just couldn't miss your simcha. And they both gave gifts, by the way. And it taught me something. They didn't come because they felt out. They came, they thought they were honoring me by coming to my simcha. And that took very big people, very, very big men, to be able to do that. Because a normal person would be, I would have been insulted, they've spoken to the person again, certainly not given a gift, blah, blah, blah. These were big enough people. And it taught me something, that sometimes in life, if you can add to somebody's simcha, right? If you can add to somebody's simcha, maybe they forgot to invite you, maybe just by popping in or whatever, you don't know what you don't know what you're doing. So if you're doing it because you feel out, well, that's one thing. But if you're doing it, if you can be big enough to see through these things and see the bigger picture, that is when you're getting it right. That's when you're into shalom. And most of us tragically, and I'm going to end with this because for 3 more minutes, most of us tragically, something happens to us and there's never shalom afterwards. There's never, I said it before, you were put wrongly at a table. Why were you put wrongly at a table? I've done quite a few functions over the years. And sometimes when you're numbering the tables, the way the floor plan works is not the same as when it's in reality. You walk in there an hour before the function, they've mucked it up and everybody gets a different seat. The truth of the matter is, maybe with a little bit of humility, with a bit of seeing the bigger picture, with being comfortable within ourselves. And that's how I want to end off the first chapter. The truth of the matter is, if you think about the flow of the first chapter, what is it all about? One of the teachings of the first mission of the first chapter is be a good friend. You can't be a good friend if you haven't worked out your own issues. And one of the things Pirkei Avos does is it teaches us to become the people that we could become. We don't want to stay immature all our lives. And let's quickly go through the flow. So the first chapter, the first Mishnah told us about the 5 principles, the 5-step program to changing your life, from humility to making a difference. The second is get your pillars right? The third Mishnah told us how to serve God. Don't serve God with reward and punishment, but become, in fact, next week I want to just delve into that again. Just fall in love with God. And Mishnah teaches you how to fall in love with God. Have love and fear of God, not fear, have love and awe of God. Chapter 4, how to treat your family. How your home should be, that there should be an ambience of openness in your home and an ambience of learning, and to be hospitable, that even the poor feel comfortable in your home, because rich people are just massaging ego. Chapter 5 is how you treat friends and neighbors, and you've got to be a good friend, and you've got to have good friends around you. You can know thousands of people, but you have to have 1 or 2 friends. Chapter 6 is how you treat the community, how you treat the community at large. And then love work, stay below the radar, love work, hate high office. And then we learned, right? Then we learned from Hillel and Shammah, just love peace, pursue peace. Always greet people favorably. When somebody comes into your main, make them feel good. Even if you're feeling a bit uncomfortable inside, make people feel good. Why are you making them feel good? Because you're finding the God in them. Everybody's special. And leads to the last Mishnah. So why I say this all is these are unbelievable teachings to transform our lives. And please God, we should make every moment count. We should all be blessed with a good week. See you next week.